Are you ready for the upcoming fall sports season? What I have to say is going to be really important if you gamble, whether or not you have a gambling problem. Because what I'm going to tell you could really help you either overcome your gambling problem or greatly reduce it, or avoid ever having one in the first place. It should be no surprise that anybody who gambles on sports really loves sports. And I am sure that your love for sports predates your gambling. In other words, you've been watching sports as far back as you can remember. You've been involved in sports probably for decades. I'm talking about whether it was participating in youth football or following a sports team with your family, etc., etc. If you sports gamble, sports are a big part of your life. Now, this next premise is probably going to be very easy for you to accept, on the surface level at least. Anything that you overdo in your life can eventually lose its value, be less pleasurable, or simply less enjoyable, right? So we can use countless examples to prove this. If you love ice cream, if you eat ice cream every single day, eventually it's just not going to be as enjoyable. Even things like sex can eventually be less pleasurable if you overdo them. And sports watching is no different. The more you watch sports, the more you become desensitized to them. What essentially happens is the receptors in your brain get dulled or deadened. And so what used to give you a lot of pleasure no longer does. And the simple reason is because you overdid it. Think about this. If you drink once a week, let's say on a Friday, that Friday of drinking will be so much more enjoyable than if you drink every single day. This concept is the exact same with sports watching. The more sports you watch, the less of an impact they have on you, the less stimulating they are to you. And so if you don't gamble, or you never had an issue with sports gambling, what I'm saying is the more you watch sports, the more you may be susceptible and inclined to more sports gambling or to even start sports gambling, because in your brain, you will start to draw that conclusion, maybe subconsciously even, that what used to be pleasurable is not pleasurable anymore. You're watching too many sports. And so now you set the stage for getting into problematic sports gambling behavior, because it's not going to take long before you desperately try to look for a way to make sports watching as fulfilling and pleasurable as it once was, whether that be several weeks ago or several years ago. And so gambling often is looked upon as a way of making sports exciting again for people who simply overdid it with their sports watching. Now you feel a need to add something to the game because you desperately want it to be so fulfilling again. So how do I make it more fulfilling? I know, I'll place a $100 bet on it. But guess what? This is going to lead to a slow downward spiral, because you guessed it, after a while, watching sports with the $100 bet, you're going to get desensitized to as well, And eventually that $100 bet has got to now be a $200 bet or a $500 bet. What happens is you're essentially going to be chasing those old experiences that you used to have with sports watching. You remember when just watching sports was enough, when just watching sports was exciting and thrilling enough. And for those of you who have a sports gambling problem, you really want to start embracing this idea now because there's a good chance that your sports gambling has kind of taken a break over the last couple months because the summer is notoriously known as kind of a dead season for sports, right? So, what you want to really be cognizant of is starting off the fall season and committing to limiting your sports watching, limiting your exposure to sports. And I'm not just talking about actually watching the sports, I'm also talking about reading up on the different teams and players and following them and looking at the statistics and jumping in on conversations about them. What I'm talking about is limiting your exposure to sports altogether, but especially with sports watching. Because once you start getting desensitized to the sports watching, you are going to be seeking an add on to make it more exciting. And as I stated before, it's a vicious downward spiral. With something to think about, this is Dr. Eric Fields. I am a gambling addiction specialist, and I hope all of you have a successful fall season in the sense that you are able to enjoy sports, but not overdo it, not become obsessed about them, not deaden those receptors, and then set yourself up for either a gambling problem that you've never had or exacerbating one that you already have. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, please let me know. It always encourages me to produce more helpful content. If you are struggling with a gambling addiction and you are seeking help, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I wish all of you the best success with overcoming sports gambling addiction or preventing it in the first place.